So I was going to do the top 10 favorite books, best books of the year first. Um, and then I got to thinking about it. And I decided, no. I'm in the mood to rant about books today. So here I am, waiting for my cat to jump on the table and ruin everything. Wearing a sweater that says always cold because I have a cold attitude toward these books. And I'm just going to go into it. Now, to be fair, this year had a lot of really, really good books, and it had a lot of really, really bad ones, but then it had a bunch that were just kind of coasting on the middle of everything. There's a bunch of books that I didn't really like love or hate. They're just there. So I'm calling this list more the worst and disappointing books. Some of these aren't awful, and some people are really going to like some of these books, and some of these books are very beloved. But out of the books that I read in 2020, not that were published, not that came out, not that debuted, but books I read personally in 2020, these are the ones that I either did not like or just did not hit the way I was promised they would hit, and therefore they were disappointing. These are not reflections on the authors. These are not reflections on the genres that are being discussed. I will probably pick up books by some of these authors again in the future. Some of these books are probably going to be your favorite, and that's fine. But me, personally, these are the books that either were just so bad or let me down really hard. These are in no particular order. I tried not to do all my heavy ranting ones near the beginning, but it is what it is. The first one I have on the list was one I thought of without having to look at my Goodreads list, and that is Star Spark by Day Lieto. I read Star Spark as an ARC. That's a lot of the same sound, during the summer, and it was terrible. It was a very bad book, and I put it in my review. If I hadn't gone and seen that this author has written other novels, I would have thought this was the first book. It was poorly written. I did not understand what the plot was supposed to be doing. The characterization was very, very flat. And I said it in the art review too. It had this vibe where the author thought things were funny and said every character should have this exact sense of humor, and that is not realistic. And all it did was make everybody very flat and one-dimensional. I could not keep up with what the heck was happening. The characters just kept getting moved around through the whim of the author. There wasn't actually motivation for it. I did not like this book. I read it again. I have an obligation because it was an ARC, but I would not recommend picking it up. It is not what it is telling you it's about, but I guess I should have known better. The next book is one I mentioned in my ARC books for fall and winter, and it is The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. My major qualm with this being on my worst books is that the mental illness rep is awful. It is very, very bad. What they decide to do to people with any kind of mental illness and making them kind of the scapegoat of, oh, of course she's acting this way. She's got borderline personality disorder. Or she's got bipolar disorder. It's like, that's not a scapegoat for your thriller. Quit making people with mental illness your villain or your character that acts suspicious in your novel. It's just lazy. It's lazy writing. And I get that. That happened, okay? Historically, women were persecuted for being outside of the norm or, just being in the way of people who didn't like outsiders. But it just seems lazy. It seems like a crutch in this novel. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't hit, as the kids say. And I'm not one to talk on mental illness rep. I do not know if this is something that people are going to be taking personal. But I personally did not like it. It made me very uncomfortable while I was reading it. And I don't think it's the right way to go with your thriller. I'm very tired of reading thrillers that rely on some form of mental illness, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, all of that stuff. It's a lazy, lazy, lazy way to make a thriller compelling, to reveal in the third act, oh, this character has this mental illness. It's not cute. Quit doing it. Find something else or get out of writing thrillers. The next book is actually a graphic novel I read at the very beginning of the year when I was doing my big graphic novel read for my comics and graphic novels class. My teacher had a hard-on for Daniel Clowes. I get it. That's who you did all your research on. You're just an expert on this man. His comics ain't that good, dude. They're just not. I did like Ice Haven, but Ice Haven is a lot different than The Death Ray, which is what made this list. The Death Ray is about a little boy growing up in the 70s with his granddad, and he gets superpowers from smoking. It is racist, it's homophobic, it's sexist, it's misogynistic. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. This next book is one of the ones that disappointed me, and it is not going to be a popular opinion on BookTube, but it is Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire. I don't think this book series is for me. I may try the second one or something in the future. I thought this was going to hit. You know, I really like stories where people go into fantasy worlds and like do good stuff. And this story is about what happens when they have to come back. I really do like that. I like that premise, but this book was not good. It set up too much and delivered nothing. Also, emotionally, I have been stuck on the little girl who got murdered and the Spider Queen was waiting for her under her bed and mourned for her because she never showed back up. That has literally been living rent-free in my head since I read this book back in January. That's terrible. I don't like being sad about that. That poor Spider Queen. Give her that little girl back. Anyway, I get it. I think I understand why people like it, and I love the diversity of this book. I love all the different characters were very interesting and different in their own ways, and I'm sure their standalone books are really good. But there was too much exposition and world building along with this mystery. It should have been one or the other, and it should have been the mystery. We should have been dropped in immediately to someone who already lives in this place and just kind of learned about it casually instead of this new girl going there. I didn't need that. I didn't need that, device to tell me what was going on. And so again, I probably would like more of the other books because it doesn't do that, I guess. But I didn't find it compelling enough to read it. So that was one of my disappointing books. I will definitely pick up Shauna McGuire's books. I want to read Middle Game. I want to read her books as Mira Grant. I've had Into the Drowning Deep on my TBR for like a year. But I just don't think I'm going to be looking up the Wayward Children series anymore. The next book was one of the disappointing ones. I don't think it was awful, and I think people would probably like it. It was called My Riot by Rick Spears. It was another arc that I read this summer about a girl in the 90s joining a band. The main problem I had with this is the art style was really confusing and kind of ugly, and not in like a clever way, just in a poorly drawn way. And it did not read as the 90s, and maybe that's my fault for being a child in the 90s. These are teenagers, so maybe I didn't live in the same 90s as them, but nothing told me this was the 90s, unless they told me it was the 90s. You know what I'm saying? They didn't show me it was the 90s. And it just drops. The ending just drops. It's all this build up to this band and this girl coming into her own and self-confidence and all this, and it just rushes and then drops, and it's not good. I'm sure someone will like it. This feels like a book that my graphic novel teacher would eat up, but I didn't really like it. I did not care for it. Oh, the next one. Next one's really bad. It was The Witching Stone by Danny Weston. This is an awful book. Do not read this book. I do not know who this book is for. I cannot tell you, because the whole time I was reading it, it reeked of middle grade. It was very childish. It's this boy that goes to stay with his dad, and he upsets this witch's curse, and now she's like, you have a certain amount of days to find out what happened to my child, or blah, blah, blah. And like, first of all, I don't care. Like, I don't care. The stakes didn't feel real until it did. It read like a middle grade. You've got these two characters that are teenagers, and they're going around trying to solve puzzles to find out what happened to this witch's child, like what happened to her. And I just do not care. And the topping on it, what made it really bad for me, is the out of left field, like, adult plot problem at the very end. This is, mind you, written about like a 16-year-old boy. He gets a call near the end, right before like the big climactic stuff, that his ex-girlfriend might be pregnant and doesn't know if it's his or his best friend who she cheated on him with. What is the vibe, Danny Weston? What do you want from me? Why was that included other than to sow drama between this boy and the new girl he's been talking to? And by the way, this plot point does not get resolved. You do not find out if he is the father of that unborn child or not. Why was that included? other than to draw parallels maybe between the witch and her baby and him maybe having a baby. It does not make any sense. It is like the mental illness thing in thrillers and mysteries. You're throwing it in there just to have some extra shit, and it's not good, and it's not well written, and it's not well developed, and it came out of left field. Why did you need a teen pregnancy scare? Why? People who reviewed this are like, oh, the puzzles were so intriguing. No, they weren't. Like I'm saying, it read like a middle grade, the whole book, because it was that boring and slow and easy. And then it's like, teen pregnancy. What is this? What is the tone? Make up your mind, Danny. I didn't like this book. I think I gave it 1 star. I do not recommend it. I was sold on this because it was like The Craft. This was not The Craft, Danny Weston. Whoever is your PR person, they're doing a good job because they really sold me something that is not what I got. I want my time back. I am reclaiming my time in 2021, and I'm not reading books like this anymore. The next book was a disappointing one. I just talked about this in my arcs. It was Flowers of Darkness by Tatiana de Rosny. Again, this one's on here because it had such an interesting premise. This older lady who is a writer moves into this AI-based commune with all these other artists, and weird things are going to happen. They want her to drink certain things and eat certain things, and people go missing, and it's very intriguing. It's like an AI haunted house, and then nothing. It just kind of putters out at the end. She goes and she escapes and moves in with her ex-husband. I don't know. Like, what did you want from me, Tatiana? Babe girl? What was the point? What was the plot? Because I thought it was one thing and then it wasn't. So that's why this is disappointing, because it ended up being like literary fiction when it was a like science fiction the whole time. That's why it's disappointing. It let me down on what the premise was. The next book was also disappointing. I understand it probably has an audience, and I understand people probably love this duology. I only read the second one, and so you will probably say, well, then you can't have this opinion because you didn't read the first one. Honey, I don't need to read the first one to be let down by the sequel, and that is Sword in the Stars by Corey McCarthy and Amy Rose Capetta. I thought the main characters were great. I think Arthur, Guinevere, and Merlin were great. I think they had enough different things going on. I think they had enough drama. They were very fleshed out, but no one else was. I don't like the meta ending. I don't like Merlin and his boyfriend talking about adaptions of Arthur. It was really cheesy and stupid, and I just don't like reading that kind of stuff. So no, this was disappointing because it like promised me big old space Arthur, and this one sent me back to historical fiction. You might be able to hear Crash Team Racing in the background. My sister just came over to game, but I've got 2 more books to talk about. Okay, so the next one is another disappointing one. Wasn't like awful, but it was Witchy by Ariel Slamet Reyes. It was a graphic novel. It came in an Owl Crate, I think back in, oh my God, June or July. Did it come in an Owl Crate this year? This year has been so long. Anyway, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It was too short, and I think it's based on a webcomic. Like, it's a bound version of a webcomic, and it just didn't give me anything. It's like, go girl, give me nothing. And I guess I just wasn't interested in the world building. So The Witchy was just, I don't know, it didn't bring enough. So this one is kind of like just to fill out the 10 spot. It wasn't the worst book in the whole world, but it could have been better. So the last book I'm going to talk about is Sold by Patricia McCormick. I just finished this one a couple weeks ago. I got it from a friend who read it for college, actually, so it was annotated with all her notes, which was fun. It's about a little girl in India who gets sold into prostitution by her family, like unknowingly, but it's written by a white lady. And she admits in the end when she talks about the collection that there are literally women in India and Nepal that go door to door explaining how you get tricked into selling your daughters into slavery and why you shouldn't do that. But like, why not tell the story about them? Or why not let one of them tell their story? This had Memoirs of a Geisha vibes, where it was written by someone else about a certain kind of person, and then that gets known as the thing. And I think this is a product of its time. I think this came out in like the early 2000s, and that was, you know, a big thing, was to write in the voice of someone else, basically. And this was also written in blank verse, which didn't make any sense. It added nothing to the story. This could have been a linear narrative, like written in regular, like, prose, and instead it was in verse for some inexplicable reason. But really that was my main thing about not liking this one, was I didn't like that it's like this white woman was cosplaying in literary form a little Nepalese girl who was sold into prostitution. I don't think this was her story to tell, and I think that there are probably other books that you could read that are more effective about telling it, that don't make it seem like Americans are the saviors of everyone when they aren't. They often aren't. And I really just would have liked to hear this from people who were actually like lived the experience. So those were the worst and disappointing books. I'm going to go now because this is the third video I've filmed in a row. And I'm going to go watch video games and eat Christmas cookies and do really nothing else.